Hey, good morning, guys. It is October 3rd, and Chambers is still in Mark 9. That story we had yesterday where the disciples, when Jesus, Peter, James, and John come down off of the Mount of Transfiguration, and the disciples are dealing with this, the boy that was having seizures, was demon possessed, and Jesus casts out the demon. And they ask him, why couldn't we cast him out? And Jesus says, and it's funny because I guess different translations say different things. He says, this kind can come out, NIV says can come out only by prayer. And another translation says only by prayer and fasting, which is what the translate. I guess that's King James that Chambers is quoting from, Mark 9:29. In any case, I think the real gist of it, the bottom line is that demons will only come out when exposed to Jesus, I think is the implication there. So, how do we get to the point that we bring the power of Jesus himself in front of a demon to cast him out? And I think and Chambers is dealing with kind of the more the valley again, the more base kind of in the trenches type of service here, not being on the mountaintop, but being in the trenches, being in the valley. And so, what has to happen then is we have to figure out a way to make the presence of Jesus come into the menial kind of difficult times, not just be enamored by the glorious times, but bring the presence of Jesus into the nitty gritty, into the trenches, I guess, with us, if that makes sense. He says, Chambers says here, we can ever remain powerless. We can ever remain powerless, as were the disciples, by trying to do God's work, not in concentration on his power, not on concentration on his power, but by ideas drawn from our own temperament, thinking that we have this figured out. Well, we say a certain prayer, and that's one of the things I struggle with. So, the sects, sects of Christianity, that rely on rote incantations. The danger in that is that we start to rely on the actual format of what we're doing versus the power that lies behind it. And I think that's the problem with most every religion, is that we start to rely on the structure versus the person. We rely on the structure of the religion and our practices and our habits, and instead of the person that lies beneath, and not even lies beneath the person that we are supposed to be carrying along. So, like I said, demon possession is not solved with some kind of incantation. It is solved by facing Jesus with a demon, and the demon saying, "I can't be here if Jesus is here." And so, how do we do that? It's not just an incantation or some recitation of some saying. And so that's indicative of a lot of things we do, I think, in the Christian life. Is we think, oh, if I do this, and this not being Jesus, if I do this thing, then I'll solve this spiritual problem. And the truth is that neglects where the power is. The power is not in doing the thing. The power is in Jesus himself. And so we slander God, he says, by our own eagerness, our very eagerness to work for him without knowing him. And that's where that's the rub, that's the challenge there, is to make sure that we are carrying Jesus with us to each of these problems. This is your line of service, Chambers says, to see that there's nothing between Jesus and yourself. Is there? If there is, you must get through it, not by ignoring it in irritation or by mounting up, but by facing it and getting through it into the presence of Jesus. So again, it all comes down to, am I bringing Jesus himself to my problem? Problems can't stand. Addictions, habits, issues can't stand. They will stand in the face of some kind of formula, some religious formula. They'll stand against that. but they cannot stand against Jesus himself. And so Chambers says, we must be able to mount up with wings as eagles, but we must also know how to come down off of that glorious kind of, ooh, where Jesus kind of just makes us feel like, no, you are loved, I know you, you know me, to come down from that and say, okay, now Jesus, come with me into the trenches. It is in our power to refuse to be humiliated in the hard stuff, and to say, no, thank you, I much prefer to be on the mountaintop with God. That's the problem. I only want the experience of being on the mountaintop. I only want to be praising and worshiping without actually carrying Jesus into the mud of life. So it spoke to me today. I hope it did to you guys. You guys have an awesome day.